think there's a danger that you're arguably flogging a dead horse. As you know, the private sector accounts for an increasingly small percentage of GDP.
For nearly a decade, HMRC has held extraordinary powers designed to target the country's worst corporate tax offenders. Parliament just revealed something that stunned the entire room. Those powers have effectively never been used against a major company. Not once.
Could you tell us how many civil investigations into fraud you have completed into large businesses?
Yeah, and I'm afraid we can't.
As MPs pushed harder, the answers became slower, vaguer, and more uncomfortable. The deeper this hearing went, the more it raised a disturbing question about accountability inside Britain's tax system. Watch closely, because some of these admissions are difficult to ignore.
HMRC has a wide range of powers, including special measures regime, though it hasn't used its powers on large businesses since it gained the powers in 2016. That's something in particular we want to explore.
Say 337 billion from the 2,000 largest businesses, which is 39% of all our receipts. And if you look at the compliance yield delivered of 15.8 billion in 24-25, that is more than double what it was in 21-22 when it was 7.1 billion. And as a return on investment, £95 for every pound spent.
It's not getting into a political debate about how much of it's wasted.
So it's important that we recognise.
Yeah. But I appreciate you. I'd love to get your, if you could put it in writing, that would be fantastic. I really would appreciate that.
It would be helpful. I think we probably have to.
Because in the end, these burdens are damaging the wealth of Britain and damaging actually the amount of extra tax you could collect.
Right. Looking at the success and saying, right, £1 spent brings £95 in. Why don't you spend more?
Back in 2016, HMRC gained legislative powers for your special measures regime. So for 10 years, you've had the power to sanction poor behaviour by the worst offenders. Why have you never used those powers?
That we haven't used the special measures powers in the last 10 years. The deterrent effect of the legislation, together with the operational activity that we already undertake, proves highly successful in shifting the behaviour of this particular customer segment.
If there is a small number there, and probably the sums of tax that could be owed at stake are significant, why has this never been used, especially considering HMRC officials came in front of this committee in 2016 and told us that it would fill a gap in your armoury if you had this special regime in place? Why is it that were the officials then incorrect, or are the officials now sitting in front of us incorrect? Which is it?
I would say it is a really important part of our armoury, and in the original design it was intended to have a deterrent effect by being on the statute book, and I think we can say that it has achieved that, because actually we've seen over time large businesses adopt a much more cautious risk approach to.
Does it not raise any concern or alarm bells of you that actually the corporation tax gap has not actually decreased in absolute monetary terms since this came into effect? So if you look between 2021 and today, it's gone up by some £2 billion. Can you understand why there perhaps is public frustration that it's never once been introduced against a large business? I think the one case where it was introduced was a small accountancy firm in Stockport, but there hasn't actually been any large business where it's been deployed, and you've had plenty of time to get on with it. Can you understand why that causes significant public frustration?
Penny, would you like to?
Yes, I will. I mean, I completely take on board the challenge. We are not afraid to take on the biggest businesses whose behaviours are evasive or deliberately dishonest.
How can you reassure us that you have a strong enough body of evidence that supports such limited use of these powers? And how can you reassure us that that body of evidence is sufficiently robust that you could say we have never or rarely used these powers, but it's okay, they are effective deterrents?
In the era when data is everything, I wondered why it is you've got access to huge amounts of data, and with the cases you're looking at, you could arguably log this data and use it much more effectively. So is there a reason why that data is only being collected inconsistently or sporadically, however you want to look at it? I wondered whether it was because of this complexity of your rule book, which makes it very difficult for you to actually work out what data you need to capture.
Could you tell us how many civil investigations into fraud you have completed into large businesses?
Yeah, and I'm afraid we can't. But as cases move across into our fraud investigation service, their case management system, the case management system that we have to monitor that, isn't capable of being cut by customer segment. So when we were working with the National Audit Office, we were able to track a handful of cases that involved large businesses, but we can't get systemic data on how many large business cases are subject to fraud.
Just to be clear, that information does not exist. HMRC do not know.
No, but
do you think that not having that information does create some gaps there in HMRC's thinking, in that you can't really have a full understanding of the scale of potential tax fraud within these 2,000 large businesses?
I think if you make things easier for businesses, you'll actually collect more tax. I think the more aggressive you are and the more you are opaque in everything you do, the more you will effectively close down Britain. And I'm a great believer in the Laffer curve, which you may or may not know about. I'm a great believer in cutting businesses free. And the easier you make it for them, I think the more tax you'll collect. So I think there's a danger in where that you're arguably flogging a dead horse. As you know, the private sector accounts for an increasingly small percentage of GDP, which is why I suspect our economy isn't turning down, because a very large share of it is now driven by the state, who is raising wages and raising its spend every week, which is why the economy is stubbornly appearing to be strong. But I think if you look at your businesses in the private sector, they're not strong, they're suffering, and I think.
After hearing both the criticism and the defence from HMRC officials, the bigger issue may not just be enforcement, but whether the system itself is capable of keeping pace with modern business. Let us know where you stand below, and subscribe for more parliamentary breakdowns.